Hi everyone, I'm Meredith, and listen, I'm just a girl stuck in my apartment looking for anyone to talk to. So I found some people. My guest is Madeleine Hackett. Madeleine recently made a major change in her life, left her job as a reporter in a local news industry. Her decision very much impacted by the pandemic. And before we start to talk about this, don't forget, like and subscribe to the Let's Talk About It YouTube channel. I don't want you to miss out on new episodes and video, so Madeleine and I will wait. Go ahead, like and subscribe. Okay, did you do it? Great. Madeleine, welcome. Let's talk about it.
Meredith, thank you so much for having me. It's so good to virtually meet you.
Absolutely, you as well. Now, talk to me about where things are with you right now. I hear you just made a pretty big change, and we're going to go into how the pandemic played into that.
Yeah, Meredith. So I would say right now, this moment is the epitome of uncertainty for me. I have been...
Everybody else, but probably for different reasons, maybe?
Yeah, definitely. I guess the epitome of uncertainty by choice. So there is kind of power in that, if you will. But also a little bit of fear, which I think is normal for a lot of people right now. As I was explaining a little background, I was a reporter for about 5 years for local NBC affiliates, most recently in Greenville, South Carolina. And once the pandemic kind of came down, we were a few months into it, I realized that this is not necessarily the place that I want to be for the next so-and-so years, for the next so-and-so months, if you will. And so I made the decision to really pivot and take a leap of faith on my own self and leave the only industry that I have known, which was local television.
How long had you been a journalist in local TV news up until now?
Yeah, so, I did the pretty typical route, went to Boston University, majored in broadcast journalism. From there, I started in a teeny tiny market of Dothan, Alabama, market 173, was there for about 2.5 years. And that's where, you really cut your teeth, did all my own filming. Then from there, went to Greenville, South Carolina, which was a big jump in local television news. That's market 38 for those who are familiar with markets, where I met Renee, our mutual friend. Yes. And I was there for about 3 years. My contract had come to an end. And I was kind of at this crossroads of extending a contract, moving on to another TV market, or getting out. And I chose the latter, to leave the industry.
So take me back even further. You majored in this in college. Did you grow up always wanting to be a journalist, always wanting to be in broadcast journalism?
Definitely. Yeah, and I think that, Meredith, is part of what makes the decision to leave so tough.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, for as long as I can remember, I think the career that I wanted to do before being a news reporter was an astronaut. And I found out that astronauts had to get shots before they went up to space. So I'm like, nope, off the table. Exactly. We're pivoting.
You don't need shots.
Exactly. I'm like, okay, I'm cool with this. No pain. Well, we'll get to that. No, but I think, that's part of it. I grew up watching the Today Show, that quintessential story of this is what I've always wanted to do. I started the media club in high school where we announced sports and had guests, local reporters come in. So this was so deeply ingrained in my identity from when I was yay high.
Yeah, I get it. It's so much of who you are.
And I think to your point of the pandemic, this made me say, okay, I've been following my dream for yada, yada, yada for this many number of years, but it made me take a step back and say, has this really been my dream? in a way, like I've been so conditioned and I've just always believed it. And it's always been the next step. Like the next step has always been planned out for me.
Okay.
You know, it was like, you go through this. Then I obviously like did that club in high school, went to school for journalism, started in a tiny market, moved to a mid-sized market. And I remember like telling my colleagues, like, we didn't come this far to only come this far, right? There was like this hustler mentality in my mind of like, I didn't start in Dothan, Alabama and like walk through the cornfields with my giant camera to stop here in this mid-sized market. Like I really believed that I could make it to a top market. But at what expense?
So where did the disconnect kind of begin? Where did like the questioning of was my dream, this is my dream, is this still my dream?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. You know, and I think it was gradual.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I approached the news industry with these rose-colored glasses. But I think I slowly began to realize more and more that in a way, local television, we became more beholden to the news of the day and meeting these deadlines than we were to the communities that we served, which was truly why I got into this in the first place. And I started to really question like how fulfilled I felt. And of course, there's like so much to be said about the TV industry and how you're like it's almost like this like sick addiction where you're like chasing this high where, you know, you got that interview or you nailed that live shot. There's a rush. But I realized more and more that I was feeling more and more depleted and more empty. And the highs.
The rushes, were you having those like rush feelings, those adrenaline highs and then like major crashes? Or were you not having that experience at all? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I mean, I think I was refusing to acknowledge it in my head because I was so laser focused on making it to that next market. And it was like, when I get there. And it's like, that's not life. I think we become so focused on actualizing these dreams that we neglect ourselves in the process along the way. And that's what I'd done. And I have zero regrets, down to just, you know, everyone at my old station in Greenville in Dothan, Alabama. It's made me who I am today. And honestly, I think it's made me a lot stronger of a person when you're able to kind of push through these things, and then show up on TV every day. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about sort of the intangibles that I acquired along the way. But I think, you know, looking back at it, I think there's a lot to be said about really staying true to yourself and like checking back in with yourself every day and asking those questions of like, am I happy or am I just on this journey of actualizing happiness that, you know, expecting it to be there when I get there.
Was there like a turning point? Do you remember this like aha moment, whether it occurred during the time that since the pandemic hit or even before that, when you said, I'm not happy anymore?
I'm done. You know, and I told you a little bit about this right before, but as I mentioned, Snapchat memories, where you can go back 1 year, 2 years ago, they come up.
And they happen on Instagram and Facebook at this time. So if you're like me, you don't have Snapchat, you're going to understand this. Don't worry.
Yes. So, you know, you're able to see where I was 1 year ago, 2 years ago. And I remember sitting in my apartment, I want to say it was about middle of June of this year, and getting the notification, your memories from 1 year ago. So, you know, I click on it. And I was actually I was having a great time outwardly. I was at a friend's wedding in Israel. But I remember looking at that picture and realizing and thinking to myself, I am in the exact same headspace that I was 1 year ago. And it dawned on me that if I don't make a change now, I could blink and be looking at these memories from 5 years ago and realizing that really there's been zero internal growth, and that I've been in the same hamster wheel, this like hamster wheel of life. And that was when that's when I told myself something's got to give, and I have to make a change. And I didn't know what that change looked like. I still don't. But I do know that regardless, I'm staying true to myself for the first time in a long time.
What had the journalism industry, or the job, if you will, like, become for you that it wasn't what you wanted anymore, that there wasn't fulfillment?
I think it gets really old, the whole bashing of the media. I mean, especially when it comes down to local journalists who are tried and true, some of the most hardworking professionals that I have ever met. And, you know, back to your earlier question of, was there one specific point? There was one other point when I was actually, and I can send you this video, Meredith, standing outside of a bar. This was, long story short, I remember that I decided to not extend my contract, that I was planning on going home, but I didn't know if I was going to continue to search for another job in local news. And I remember going out on a walk that night before my live shot. I was the nightside reporter, so I would go live at 11, and looking up at the sky and just asking like the universe for a sign. Because I was like, please just give me a sign. And, you know, of course we like ask that and expect to see some sort of shooting star or something crazy like that. Nothing happened. There was no like awakening or anything magical. But that night, on my live shot, I was standing outside a bar telling a story, trying to promote people to go and support this local establishment. When this man out of nowhere essentially came up from behind me, accosted myself and my cameraman, screaming at us for God knows what reason. And I remember looking at him and being like, thank you. Like there it was. Like there was my sign.
What a awful sign to receive. What an awful way to get the message.
I mean, jarring, yes,
right.
To say the least. And it goes down to the fact that he like pulled his mask down in front of my face, screamed in my face, and I was like, thank you, sir. You made my decision a heck of a lot easier. I'm out.
Thank you.
For the bird.
No one ever in that situation. Unbelievable.
You know, and it's like that. It had just compounded and compounded from, you know, the dirty stares that you would get, people refusing to give you an interview. And it was like, I was like white knuckling my way through the days. That's what the job turned into. It was like this, and I've never been like that. Like I've always considered myself such a happy, like, effervescent human. And it's like, I was not who I wanted to be. I was not the person that I used to be, and certainly not the person that I want to be.
Find it seeping into your personal life, or, you know, after and when you got to go home, when you weren't on the clock?
True. So I think a big part of that is like, there's, with COVID, with everything, with the pandemic, there was no distinction. So I was doing everything. We weren't going into the newsroom. I was working from my apartment. I was tracking my stories on my iPhone. There was absolutely no separation. Yeah. And, you know, I've always prided myself in a way of saying, like, I'm so jaded. I'm able to go to this shooting and talk with the mom who just lost her son and leave it at work, but it seeps in.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely. Like I have considered myself one pretty tough, but I think after a while it seeps in, and you start being affected by it, maybe in ways that aren't super obtrusive, but that definitely start to add up.
Yeah. So what was it like reporting? What had it been like reporting about during the pandemic, and how did that time make your feelings about the work and the job and the industry, I guess, worse?
Yeah. And, you know, I don't want to say that it was, that's a tough question. It just got old. It got old fast. We were having to cover a pandemic related story for the first 3 months every single day. There was no interaction with the people that I was meeting. You know, where I once felt this deep fulfillment, at least of being able to highlight people in our communities. Maybe even if it was one for every 5 stories I covered that week, I was still getting that. I was no longer getting any of that. A lot of it was fear-based. A lot of it was important. And I feel like if I had been still fulfilled and passionate about the work, I would have taken pride in keeping my local community safe, if you will. Mm-hmm. But that had completely dissipated.
What do you mean by there was about things being fear-based? Were you scared to be doing the job? Did you feel like there was almost a promotion of like fear for the sake of selling the news?
Yeah. I think both. I think sensationalism happens, you know, and when it comes to website clicks and what people want to watch, if it bleeds, it leads.
Right.
And that gets old. And I think people are sick of that. I mean, I hate how, again, like beholden we are to this old news concept of you know, showing these shootings and grim news day in and day out. I think people are tired of it, but at the same time, there's still this like innate human interest in it.
Right.
And that's what sells ads.
Right.
So it's this cycle that isn't going to stop unless, you know, we do something about it.
Were you having to go out into the field as well? Was that scary?
It was not comfortable. No. I mean, I remember, I feel like I developed like a slight OCD when it all started, especially with hand washing, which isn't a bad thing, but I mean, it was like to the point of obsession.
Yeah.
Especially, and I'm sure you remember, Meredith, and you're in New York City, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, when this began, it was really scary. I can't even imagine for you. I think there's a distinction between, because I went to school up, so I have a lot of friends in Boston, mm-hmm. and I'm from Pennsylvania. And I think cities like Greenville compared to New York City, there's a stark difference.
Would imagine.
Yeah, especially just obviously with New York getting hit so hard, and then people still not really believing it in the South. But when it all came down, I mean, I genuinely remember being terrified. Right. But what made it worse was, again, that bashing of the media. Like, I'm out here putting my own life on the line to inform you and get you the facts. I don't have some hidden agenda. There's no like gotcha here. I'm just trying to keep my local community informed and do my job and get home safely. Like, that's it. Right. And this total lack of respect, it just gets old. I don't need a trophy. I don't need constant compliments and accolades, but some respect would have been really appreciated throughout all of it.